Okay, so I'm back with some ways to approach doing a landscape. And I'm just going to do 4 little ones real quick that you can try, and then maybe hopefully you'll have a better grasp of how you might do this in real life. Okay, so I'm going to start up in the corner with the one that's going to be just a daytime scene. So we're going to have blue sky, clouds, some trees, and I have sketched out a little barn kind of thing. So I'm going to wet the paper first kind of quickly, and I'm going to go around my little barn kind of carefully. I always kind of paint on a landscape. I paint from the background first, work forward, and then add the details last. And also from light to dark. So let's start here with some blue sky. Remembering that watercolor does tend to fade, so you want to make it a little darker than what you want it to dry. When it dries, it's going to be lighter. So we're going to paint some clouds, and I want them to be soft, so I wet the paper, and then I'm just going to kind of work around some of the areas and leave some clouds. Oops, got in my roof there a little bit, but that's okay. And we'll leave a cloud there too. Kind of a summer sky. And I'm real fast going to dry that so I can keep going. That wet and wet, it made my clouds look soft and fluffy. I don't have to make hard-edged clouds. So now I'm going to go back here and put some woods off in the distance. Brown, maybe a little bit of green. I want them kind of subdued because they're off in the distance. Let's make it a green. Oops. I say oops a lot, I guess, in watercolor. We're going to make, these are going to be like trees that are off in the distance. Always turn your paper however it's less awkward for you to get to where to be able to do what you need to do. It's usually easier to pull a brush than it is to push a brush. So I'm just putting a little wash of green, of kind of a subdued green, to look kind of like trees back there in the background, off in the distance. So we'll let that dry, and I may revisit that a bit. Oops, got my hand into it over there. Okay, so now let's do a little bit brighter green, but green out of the paint box is usually a little too bold for grass, so I'm going to yellow it up a little bit here. Maybe bring a little of that brown down into it so that it's not paint box green, it's a pretty grassy green. And I might need a little bit bigger brush. Remember to choose your brush according to the area you're painting to most easily fill it and not put in a lot of streaks. You want to use the biggest brush you can use, especially when you're laying kind of a flat wash area. Alright, so then I'm going to have some weeds and things up here in the foreground. May have to wait on that a minute. I'll put the ground in now. Okay, I'm doing a video. So I am that was Mrs. Eckstein, popped in to see me for a minute. Okay, so we have kind of our big shapes done. I'm going to go in and do a little bit of the barn. Now, you have to kind of decide which way is my light coming from. Is it afternoon? So maybe this front side of the barn is in the shadow. So I'm going to, oops, lots of black there. I want a gray. So let's bring a little of the black over here. And add some water to it. I don't like my black just black. I like to put a little blue in it so it looks a little less tinted. Okay, so we're going to shadow this side of the barn. And then I'm going to take a little brush, that same gray, and kind of add some barn boards texture to the side of the barn that's going to be in the light. It's going to be hit by the light there. Okay, and speed dry that real quick. Keep a tissue nearby, that helps with drying things. All right, so I'm going to put, let's see, what color roof shall we have? Red roof on our barn? White barn, red roof. So I'm going to get some red here. And as long as you're dry, you can paint right up to what you've already painted. But if you try to do it while it's wet, that's when you will have problems. Okay. I'm just going to go along this edge so I get a little bit of the red there. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm in here with a little bit of dark gray. This is dry enough, I think. And put in my barn door. And some boards on the barn here. Remember, I'm just doing this really quickly for you. You can pay much more attention to details than what I am. Now, let's see. Let's dry again real quick. And I'm going to put a little shadow under the edge of the roof, under the eave, I guess that would be. Helps with my three-dimensional look here. Looks too dark, you can take a tissue and blend it out. My barn's starting to get a little three-dimensional. Now I'm going to add a little bit of tree branch area, or tree trunk area, I guess I would say, in the background here, just a little. I don't want to do too much. I just want it to look like there's trees back there, but they're not real detailed. Patted those with my finger, but you could use the tissue or whatever. All right. Okay, now I'm going to do some dry brush for the weeds up front. So I'm going to take the water, I rinsed my brush, but I'm going to take the water out of it. And I want a nice deep green, maybe a brown. Let's start with a green. And this is dry surface, and I'm going to go in and use that little stroke of, lifting stroke kind of, that we learned in the videos, to put some grass down in that area. Make it a little bit of an interesting foreground. Now I could go back then, and I'm going to kind of be mean to my brush. You see that I'm kind of spreading it out there so it's not nicely pointed. And I'm going to go in and whisk some of that in just to make it a little more interesting. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is do a little tree up front here. So I'll start with my, too brown. I'm going to get a fairly dark color because I'm going to be painting over some of this grass, and it'll cover if you're using a dark color. And I'm going to paint my tree up. Let it get narrower as it comes up, and I'm going to blot it a little so that it isn't quite so black. These trees are actually kind of grayish if you think about it. All right, and we'll grow some branches out of it. This is where learning to handle that brush comes in handy, because you want to be able to get the little branches out at the ends really small. Oops. And if it helps, you can turn it around and pull your brush towards you. And just add as many branches as you want. Branch trees have a lot, so the more you add, probably the more realistic it's going to get. I'll put it out here in front of the barn a little bit. And then it's a bare tree right now. Maybe it's spring. We'll put a few leaves on it. Like it's just starting to leaf out. Let's do some light ones first. It doesn't have to cover the whole thing, and trees don't have to look like lollipops. You can show the branches. I'm going to go back with a few greener branches, a little bit black. Be careful, again. Just be careful with the black. You get too much pretty quickly. Some branches coming towards us maybe, so that we don't see the branches, but we see the clumps of leaves. A little texture, let some of that lighter green show through. And voila, you have a little tree. Okay, so that was kind of a hurried thing, but I'm going to pause there for a second. Okay, so let's move on to this sunset silhouette. We're going to make it over a beach scene with water out here. So I need to wipe this green out of my tissues. Indispensable with watercolor, you need them. You could use toilet paper too. All right, so we're going to do this one like a silhouette with a sunset background. So again, we're going to do that wet and wet thing. So I'm going to just wet the sky right down to the edge of the water. And then I'm going to go in with yellow, and my yellow looks awful right now. Clean that up a little bit. I don't really want green in my sunset. So I'm going to go in quickly with yellow along the horizon, like the sun is down there setting. And then I'm going to go up with some oranges. A little bit of oranges floating around there, making it interesting. I don't want it to be ultraviolet. Most sunsets aren't. Let's do a little red. Just let it float around, kind of be interesting looking. I might have gotten a little wet to start here, so maybe don't get it as wet as I did. And then I'll do some blue up at the top. Now you have to watch putting what colors you're putting beside each other, because they're going to blend. So if you end up with blue beside your yellow, like I've got over here, you very well might have a green in your sky, which could be interesting. Just depends on what you want, I guess. Yeah, it was a little wet to start. That's probably why I'm having a little struggle with it here. I'm going to take that off. I'll go back and touch it up a little bit and put my yellow back in. So it's a little bolder. I don't want all my yellow to get taken over by everything else. Okay, let's do a little more red there. Make it a little bolder. And where my yellows and reds overlap, I should get some orange, but I can also go in and put in some orangey places. Let it float around a little bit. Let it be looking kind of cloudy or whatever. Okay, we're going to let that dry. While we do that, I'm going to try to make a darkish color for the beach because it's nighttime, evening. So normally I might make it like a more sandy color, but I think we'll go with kind of a browner color along there. So that it looks like it's dark at night. Okay, and a little puddle there. And I'm going to dry it. You can kind of just let your skies go wild and see what they do when the water floats. The wet and wet floats around there and get some different effects going on. Okay, I am going to go in and put a little bit of yellow in my water area where I want my sun to be reflecting. So I'm going to do that first. A little bit more closer up. Dry that quick. And then we're going to do some water. Now, I think I'm going to go a little blue-green with the water. I don't think I want it just exactly the color of the sky. And first I'm going to paint it kind of light, then I'll go back in. So I'm going to paint up close to where I put my reflection there. Oops, got in my beach a little bit there. I'm going to leave a little bit of white along the edge of my water there, so it's like the frothy edge of the wave coming up there and on the edge. Okay. And again, I'm going to dry that real quickly. And I'm going to go back in with my small brush, a little bit bluer color. And I'm going to put some, might put some dark along the horizon there. And then kind of break it up, put some places that make it look like waves. So kind of broken color, close together, someplace overlapping, but letting some of that lighter blue show through. Over here we probably wouldn't see the waves as much. So you can play around with that. We wouldn't see as many defined waves further back. So, okay, you can speed through the drying. You can go fast through the times I'm drying. Okay, so then we're going to put in a couple palm trees. And don't worry if this, see, I kind of like how that looks all it's not just perfect bands of color, because it just makes it more interesting. So let's do black. Maybe just a little brown in it to soften it up a little bit. And let's plant a couple palm trees here. I'll start up in here. And if it's easier, because sometimes it's easier to pull the brush, I'm going to pull the brush up to make my palm trees. And just make them littler as they go up here, kind of. Three looks better than 2. I mean, odd numbers look better than even numbers. So I'm going to do 3 trees. So I've got my trunks there. You can pencil them in first if that helps you be able to tell where you want them to be. And I think I'll just make that kind of dark back in there. Okay, now palm fronds. What we're going to do is start in the middle and pull out where this palm's going to be. So just put, it's going to look kind of like an umbrella with no covering here at first. Do the same thing here, turn it a little bit. And it's a silhouette, so it's going to be dark. You could do it with a daytime thing, and you could do the palms the same way and make them different shades of green, kind of like I did in the grass over here. All right, so now we have the structure of those palm trees. I'm going to go in and put in, oops, needs to be a little darker, got in the wrong petal. I'm going to grow the fronds out of the palms so they look kind of realistic. A couple stick up here. And look at that, we're getting kind of a real beachy looking scene. And just continue that, do that on all your branches. And see, I'm just painting, right? That way I've painted my whole sky first, and because I'm putting something dark over it, I don't have to worry about doing it with painting around anything. Painting around things is annoying. You want to be able to just kind of put your palm trees in there, and I'm hurrying this, and I'm sure you can be neater with it. Actually, go in and look at a picture of palm trees so you see what they actually look like in a shadowed kind of thing. And that would be our sunset silhouette. Okay, so over here I'm going to do a little snow scene. So with snow, I'm going to pause a minute and get some clean water. Okay, I'm back with clean water. On this one, I think I'm going to do something different. I'm going to put a little moon up there for my pencil. Always looking for my stuff here, and it seems like nobody else is here, but it gets away from me. Well, here's a pencil. So let's do, I'm going to put a moon up in the sky. So we'll have to, I'll put some color in our moon, but then we'll have to paint around it. We'll paint around it first. Let's do kind of a purpley, I like to do purpley blue skies with snow. It's just, I think it's pretty. And it looks kind of like nighttime. You can add black to it. You can do black if you want to. Totally up to you. I don't mind to be bluer than that. All right. So it's going to be a nighttime snow scene. We're going to work around our moon. And I did not wet the surface this time. I'm just overlapping the strokes as I come down. Keep the brush wet and full of paint. Okay, so I have a little dark sky. Now I'm painting so small that it's really kind of hard to keep the moon looking round. In a bigger one, it would be easier. I was using a big brush. But the moon usually has some places where you can see the craters and things on it. So I'm just going to put some kind of the man in the moon thing on there. Now, I might have been better to wait because I've kind of messed up my sky a little bit, but that's okay. Like I said, it'd be much easier to paint around that if it was a little bigger. Could make it yellow moon if I wanted to, whatever. So, I'm going to do some trees off in the background here. I'm just going to make them very dark. And if they bleed up into my sky a little bit, I'm okay with that. It's kind of tree silhouettes back there. Maybe a little blacker so that they'll show up a little bit back there. That's the woods off in the distance. Kind of mixed blacks and blues there and purple. Kind of the same puddle that I used for my sky. Okay, so there's the woods. We have a really exaggerated large moon here tonight. But that's the beauty of art. You can create it the way you want to make it. Okay, so I want some snowdrifts. And in the nighttime, the snowdrifts tend to have blue-purple look to them. But I want them kind of light. This moon is big and out over mine. So I'm going to put some soft kind of purpley grays out there. And then blend the bottoms of them so I can get some interesting little snowdrifts going on. All right, I'm going to dry that real quick. And I'm going to grow some trees up over it, some in the foreground, some trees. So let's use some black. And let's plant those trees on here. And I'm going to make them go up over the moon and around the moon. I'll take away from my weird shaped moon too. And if you use the tip of your brush, you can get some of those little branches, but it's practicing how to touch the paper with your brush so that you get those real little skinny lines. Those are good when you want to do some texture in hair or, anything that requires a really fine line. So this is kind of a dry brush technique. Might grow a couple more trees here real quick for you. Just let them crisscross each other. Obliterating my moon there. But maybe they're just little saplings along the fence row or something. Oops, see, I went a little heavy there. Got kind of a thick branch, but now, if the moon were actually shining on these trees, the shadows would be coming forward. So I'm going to add from the base some long shadows here that would be the moon casting shadows on the ground there. And if I think they're a little bold, again, just grab a tissue and kind of pat them out a little bit. There you go. You've got the moon shining on the snow. All right, let's do one more. This one is going to be mountains. And it's going to be what we call aerial perspective. If you took 7th grade art with me ever, you may have studied aerial perspective, and that is the way things look darker or look more faded farther away from you. So I'm going to start with just a really normal looking kind of blue sky. I'm just going to brush that over. I've sketched some mountains on here just lightly, and if you look up aerial perspective, you can find some examples. And I'm just going to paint my sky down a ways here, right kind of over the mountains that I have there. I'm going to dry them. Cut it up there and drop water on my sunset. Oh, it was just a practice anyway. All right, so I don't know if this is really dry enough yet, but we'll try it. So what we're going to do is take that sky color, and I'm going to add a little bit of green to it. We're going to go with a blue-green kind of, but they're going to be bluer farther back. So our first mountains are going to be this kind of light blue-green color off in the distance. And if you look up some photos of mountains off in the distance, you will see that they quite often look like that. Now that's my farthest back one, so I'm going to fade them out just a little more because I want them pretty light. Put a little water on them and brush them down because I'm going to make some more mountains in front of them. And again, with a clean tissue, and also kind of blot them, and that kind of gives them a nice texture. Okay, speed dry again. Okay, now we're going to have the little mountains a little bit closer to us. So I'm going to add a little more blue, make this a little bolder color, a little more green, a little deeper color. Whoops. And I'm going to go in here and do the mountains that are in front of it. And again, I'm painting some color. I'm painting darker colors over lighter colors, so normally that will work that way. Okay, I'm a little more faded here. I'll wet them, and I will do a little bit of tapping on them. I like that. It turned out well. And a little more drying. Let's have a bolder mountain range in front of this. So more green, more blue, and I'm going to darken it with just a little black too to get it really here. So these will be the up close mountains, and that's what aerial perspective means. It's things are more distinct and deeper colored, closer to us. All right. Okay, a little bit of blotting, not too much. And I'll dry that. Now I've sketched out, and I don't know if you can see it here very well, but I have sketched out a river, like a river or a road going back. I think I will make it just a little heavier so that you can see it, although when you work with watercolor, you want to draw kind of lightly, so not so much of it shows. So notice how I'm making it get wider as it comes forward, so it's disappearing off in the distance, so that's how a road might look. I think we'll make it into a road. It could be a river. So I'm going to start with some grass up here in the foreground, up next to my road. You want to be careful with your brush strokes in paint because they tend to dry the way you put them on there. You see the line in them, so if you're drawing something you don't want it to have up and down lines, or you want to watch which way it's going to dry. Okay. So the main thing, get your base colors in first. My road kind of disappears back in there. So I kind of like to go across my landscape with my brush. All right, we're going to make sure you don't leave your brushes near water. It's not good for them. I'm going to loosens the glue and your bristles fall out. I'm going to darken some really dark green here. And I'm going to go along the base of my mountain to make some little pine tree areas, the woods back there, or whatever. I'm not going to be real particular with it. It's off in the distance, so we would not see the details. It would just look like clumps of trees or whatever. And just do that by just kind of dabbing my brush along there. Okay, I've got some off in the distance trees. So let's add something to make the road look like a road. It could be a dirt road. It could be a gravel road. We'll kind of make it a combination of both, kind of make it brownish gray. I'm going to, kind of got out my line there. I'll try to lighten this up just a little bit, kind of darker than I wanted it to be. Okay, so we got a little road. Let's dry quick. It shouldn't take long. Pretty dry. Looks like I need to touch up my grass there a little bit. I'm going to put some pine trees in this one, so we have a different kind of scene. So I'm going to do some that are farther back and some that are up close. So I'm going to make one that's a little bit farther back first. So planted back here. I'll just take my brush and go back and forth and get a little skinnier as I go up. Let's do another one here. This one will be a little bit littler. If the base is farther back, then they're farther away from you. If where the bottoms start. Let's do a bigger one here. So see how easy it is to just kind of dabble back and forth with that. And let's make one up really close here. So I'll make it taller, as close to it. And go back and forth. Again, a little bit. And you could do this, you could go in with some lighter greens and then you could go back in with some darker greens, especially on the up close pine tree. I'll show you here in a second. Back and forth. See, that kind of lifts that in the back so it does kind of cover there even though it's darker. We're going to make these the kind of pine trees that have sweeping branches that come clear to the ground because I don't want trunks on them. Okay, and then I'm going to take a really dark green and go in here and kind of shadow under some of the branches so that it looks a little bit like three-dimensional, like we get some branches where, or some places where there are shadows inside it. And just can be random. And that pretty much does our landscape up. We could do, there's all kinds of things you could add. You could do a regular tree somewhere. You could add some weeds along the side of the road. Just practice some of these things. You know, use your imagination. What would you see? Maybe you could paint a bear out there somewhere. So that's what I got for you. I hope you enjoy it. I hope to see some nice watercolors coming from your home. See you later. Bye.